Why does Japan discharge nuclear contaminated water into the ocean? In 2011, an earthquake occurred in the Pacific Ocean northeast of Japan, triggering a tsunami. A large amount of water hit Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant and later caused an explosion. At that time, Japan's Tokyo Electric Power Company used a large amount of seawater to cool down the burned nuclear reactor. In fact, more than 10,000 tons of contaminated seawater was discharged at that time. Afterwards, Japan stored the contaminated seawater in water storage tanks. From 2011 to 2023, Japan built more than 1,100 water storage tanks in 12 years. Each water storage tank can store an average of 1,000 and 1,300 tons of water. So far, the capacity of the water storage tanks has basically reached saturation. So, they choose to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. In addition to discharging nuclear contaminated water into the sea, is there any other way to deal with it? Yes, such as evaporative relief, electrolytic discharge, underground burial, etc. These are all options. However, Japan finally chose to discharge the nuclear contaminated water through submarine pipelines because this method is the simplest and most economical. It is extremely irresponsible to transfer the source of pollution to the rest of the world in this way. Normal nuclear power plants produce nuclear wastewater, while Japan's Tokyo Electric Power Company produce nuclear contaminated water. Nuclear wastewater and nuclear contaminated water are not the same thing at all. The wastewater of ordinary nuclear power plants comes from cooling water and a small part of waste liquid. The cooling water is completely isolated from the core, and the radioactivity is extremely low, and the core fuel is also protected in the fuel cladding. So there will only be medium and low level in the waste liquid. However, the situation in Japan is that the reactor core melted down and a lot of highly radioactive materials enter the water, and they will harmful for many years. For example, radioactive elements with very high atomic numbers such as cesium-137 are very harmful. However, in reports, Japan deliberately confused the two kinds of nuclear water. Japan is the first country in the world to discharge nuclear contaminated water into the sea. Japan says their nuclear contaminated water is treated by ALPS and it's very safe. Leaving aside what they think is safe, why not save the issue of irrigating the farmland or drinking it by themselves? How can ALPS filter out harmful substances? First of all, in theory, ALPS has a filtering function, but can TEPCO be able to remove harmful substances in nuclear contaminated water? We are not very sure, because their own data is that nuclear contaminated water contains 63 kinds of radioactive elements. But Japanese media said that nuclear contaminated water theoretically contains about 210 kinds of radioactive substances. According to feedback from the Atomic Energy Agency of other countries, water samples cannot be taken outside Japan for testing, so it is impossible to determine how many harmful elements are in it, and it is not sure how much TEPCO system has removed. Secondly, the APLS treatment system currently used by TEPCO, in simple terms, it lights a super big water purifier, and we all know that water purifiers need to replace the filter element regularly. According to the original design, the contaminated water treated by ALPS should be able to meet the standard. However, due to various problems, in 2016, 4 leaks were found in the device. In 2018, radioactive substances were exposed to exceed the standard. In 2021, nearly half of them were found the filter elements is damaged. Therefore, currently, 66% of water storage tanks contains harmful substances that exceed standards. So we have to go through secondary filtering. There is so much dark history that we don't believe in the current handling method of TEPCO. What is even more outrageous is their attitude in dealing with the problem. They did not spend money and energy on solving the problem itself. For example, reparation plans proposed by other countries were rejected because they were too expensive. Instead, they put their money into lobbying various international organizations and even victimizing the image of China, which is responsible for the environment and opposes their sea discharge. Finally, if ALPS can really remove harmful substances in nuclear contaminated water, can it win 10 Nobel Prizes? The International Atomic Energy Agency has issued a report. Can it prove that nuclear contaminated water can be discharged into the sea safely? Interested friends can download and read this report by themselves. Generally, reports will indicate the name of the person who took the sample and describe the entire sampling process in details. However, the report issued by the AEA is not rigorously at all, and it's not as good as our usual reports. However, the testing process can be explained in just a few words. Who knows whether the water samples you got are samples that Japan has pursued many times and is charted just to pass the test? How is the convincing? The IAEA also does not recommend that Japan discharge nuclear contaminated water into the sea. Why does Japan use this report as an endorsement for their discharge into the sea? How much impact does nuclear contaminated water have on us? First of all, nuclear contaminated water contains 64 kinds of radioactive elements, and these elements will be enriched by animals in the ocean. We eat such seafood containing reactive elements, which will cause people to suffer from various cancers. You can check the relevant information. Those who were exposed to nuclear radiation had to be sealed in coffins made of lead after death. The bones of the corpse, dug up after 33 years, all glowed green. In the past, people said that after death, just scatter the ashes into the sea. If you die from nuclear radiation and your bones are all made of heavy metal elements and are all glowing, don't even think about returning to natural. Secondly, through the evaporation of the atmosphere, it is transformed into water with reactive substances, and fresh water resources will be polluted, and crops and livestock on land will be affected. Could it be that you don't eat or drink for decades? Furthermore, 21% of the air is oxygen, but oxygen is produced by plants through photosynthesis. But the oxygen produced by plants on land is less than 30%, which means that more than 70% of the world's oxygen is produced by seaboard manufactured. These agro are very vulnerable to nuclear radiation. Therefore, after Japan's nuclear contaminated water discharge, even if you can survive without eating or drinking, what should you do if there is no oxygen? Therefore, Japan's discharge of nuclear contaminated water into the sea is really extremely vicious. In addition to the problem of cancer, we will have to face the biggest problem of hypoxia. Didn't you know when you went to Mount Everest? The Earth is round, and the moon and sun you see in China are the same moon and sun as you see in Italy, Spain, Germany, Finland, and United States. The ocean is following. Japan discharged nuclear contaminated water. Sooner or later, radioactive materials will pollute the world's seas along with the ocean currents, and no one will be spared. Radioactive substances are continuously enriched through the food chain, and there are various destruction paths after entering the human body. For example, cesium will affect the thyroid gland, and strontium will invade the bones. Even a small amount of coal will cause great damage to local organs, increasing the risk of local cancer. I would like to ask, without clean water and clean food, how far can you and your next generation go? We have to spend the rest of our lives in the process of constantly taking medicine to treat disease or performing surgeries to cut off patients. What is the meaning of such a life? The beauty of the world will only remain in the past. Without the future, even if you hold power and control the entire world, what can you enjoy? Regarding Japanese discharge of nuclear contaminated water into the ocean, what have you done to protect our only Earth? What have you done to protect those who love you and those you love?